As we inch closer to the release of Heatwave Arena over in Japan, outside of Japan, this set is going to be called Destined Rivals and include the Team Rocket cards. We have been seeing more and more cards from that Heatwave Arena set. We've already seen cards for Misty's deck, Ethan's deck, and Cynthia's deck, which look absolutely incredible. The Garchomp in particular, with that whole Cynthia package, looks nuts. But how does Arven's deck look? I'm Jet from InThirdPerson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's take a look at Arven's cards from Heatwave Arena, as well as a couple of other interesting ones, to say the least. Of course, Arven's featured Pokemon is Mabosstiff EX. If you played the Scarlet and Violet video games, I think the Arven Mabosstiff stuff is actually like the best storyline in the game. So I'm really happy to see that Arven and Mabosstiff get a key role in the TCG. Mabosstiff is a dark type Pokemon with 270 HP, and it has 2 attacks. We'll actually start with the second one first. Boss's Headbutt for 3 colorless energy does 210 damage, and during your next turn, this Pokemon can't use Boss's Headbutt. Now, 3 energy is a lot, especially since we don't have Dark Patch in the format anymore, and we don't have double turbo energy anymore, so there's no real easy way to power this up quickly. And 210 damage it's not enough. Yes, you will one-hit KO stuff like a Squawkabilly EX, a Teal Mask Ogerpon, a Pheasantipity EX, but that's a lot of turns and resources to build to just hit 210. For that type of attack, you really want to be hitting 220 to 230, at which point you're knocking out stuff like Iron Hands and Roaring Moon EX and getting those big KOs on a lot of the big basics in the game. 210 is simply not enough. Now, what does make this card, at the very least, interesting is the Hustle Tackle attack. For 1 colorless energy, does 30 damage, and if this Pokemon has no damage counters on it, this attack does 120 more damage. So 150 damage for only 1 energy, and you only have to evolve to a stage 1. That could be kind of cool, but 150 doesn't feel like enough, right? You're not knocking out any of the relevant multi-prize Pokemon. Squawkabilly's out of range of this. A Gardevoir, even if you're hitting for weakness, Gardevoir EX, which is the most prominent thing you'd want to hit for weakness, doesn't get one-hit KO'd by this thing without any sort of damage modifiers. And yes, you could play a bunch of damage modifiers to maybe make this a little more relevant, but I'm not sure that's going to be enough. 150 just feels like a bad number, even if it's at an efficient 1 energy. I don't think it's enough. Maybe there's enough damage modifiers in the game to make this more relevant, but 150 by itself doesn't feel good enough, especially because you have to have full HP. If you don't have full HP and you're only doing 30 damage, this is miserable. Maybe its damage is a bit underwhelming, but it does have a way to keep its HP up in a way that other decks don't. Arven's Sandwich is a healing item where it heals 30 damage to your active Pokemon, but if it's an Arven's Pokemon, you heal 100 damage instead. At that point, now this becomes a little more interesting, because if you've got 2 of these in hand, you're healing 200 damage, and maybe you have 3 of these and you can heal all the way back up to 270, and then you can swing, but like at that point you're still swinging for only 150 damage, and I'm not sure that's enough, even with the extra healing in tow. And we even have a way of recovering the sandwiches. We have Arven's Greedent, where its attack sucks, but Greedy orders an ability that when you evolve up to Greedent, you can grab 2 of Arven's sandwiches from your discard pile into your hand. So towards the mid to late game, you have the opportunity to grab those sandwiches back and heal off. But again, I just don't think we're doing enough damage with the Arven, or with the Arven's Mabosstiff, to make this worthwhile. This whole ecosystem of healing damage just doesn't feel like enough when the attack that we're doing is mostly just 150 damage for 1. And maybe there will be times you can tank a hit and eventually build up to doing the 210. Maybe you've got some other damage modifiers in play, but I just feel like this Mabosstiff EX and this whole game plan feels, it doesn't feel like enough relative to where the game is at right now. And based on what we've seen of the other new cards from Journey Together and now Destined Rivals, I don't think this is great. Maybe I will be proven wrong. Maybe the damage modifiers will be enough to bring this up a notch. And I will say this, as someone who has played the Scarlet and Violet based game, I do love that Arven and Mabosstiff do have a role in the TCG, and the integration here does make a lot of sense because Arven and Mabosstiff's whole thing is that Arven gives Mabosstiff the sandwich, and Mabosstiff like gets its powers back over time the more sandwiches you give. So it makes a lot of thematic sense that the cards work the way they do. I don't necessarily hate the idea of sacrificing a bit of damage for some healing. I just don't think that the solution that we have here is going to be quite enough to make this deck worthwhile. Overall, I'm a little disappointed in the Arven cards, but maybe the Zero Aura could have something to it. Its first attack, Scratch, for a colorless does 20 damage. It's not great. But its second attack, Thunder Blitz, for 3 lightning energy. You discard all energy from this Pokemon and you do 210 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon EX. And this is a very cool attack. There are a number of bench-sitting EX Pokemon that have 210 HP or less. This is an easy way to snipe out something like a Squawkabilly EX or a Pheasantipity EX for 2 prizes on a single prize attacker in Zero Aura. And right now, there's not much in the way of bench protection in the game. No one's really running Rabsca right now because it's stage 1, you have to take time to set it up, and if you lose the pre-evolution before you get fully set up, then you completely wasted your time. So right now, bench sniping is at a premium, and this is one of the best bench snipers going forward. 210 is nuts, and we can build this up in the context of a Lightning Miraidon deck with Electric Generator. Now, Miraidon is a deck in post-rotation format that's not looking so hot. Based on what we've seen from Japan, the deck is really struggling because it just lost a number of key attackers in Raikou and Raichu. Zero Aura is an interesting substitution for those. It does a different thing, but for building up 3 energy, you get a free KO on a Squawkabilly or a Pheasantipity EX. You throw that energy in the discard pile, and then Magneton can then accelerate that back on a future turn, powering up something like an Iron Hands or some other relevant attacker. And maybe this sees its way into whatever the heck Miraidon decks look like going forward. I do like this attack. I'm not sure that it has enough of a infrastructure right now. I definitely don't think this is going to be enough to save Miraidon, but in a world where Miraidon does find its way to come back, I could see this card slotting in there. Most of the Ogerpon EX cards have worked their way into the competitive meta. This time around, we have a whole set of single prize Ogerpon cards to look at. We're going to start with Teal Mask Ogerpon here. It has the first attack, Grass Dance, where for 1 grass energy, you get to search your deck for a basic grass energy card and attach it to one of your Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. I will say, just as a heads up, all of the Ogerpons have a variation of this attack depending on the typing. So Teal Mask Ogerpon's grass, it attaches a grass energy. The water one attaches water. The fire one attaches fire, and so on. And yeah, the fighting one attaches fighting. Might as well lump them all in here. So they all have that same first attack with the energy type difference. And then the second attack here, Ogre Hammer for 2 grass and a colorless, does 120 damage. And during your next turn, this Pokemon can't use Ogre Hammer. Now, maybe we could build this up in the context of a Teal Mask Ogerpon EX, where that has that Teal Dance ability. You attach a grass energy to itself, and then you can E-switch to it. 120 damage for 3 energy, and you can't attack on the next turn. I don't think this card is particularly strong. Hearthflame Mask Ogerpon has some really nice art from Haiganosuke, who's done some amazing work over the years, and its Searing Flame attack for 2 fire and a colorless does 80 damage, and your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned. We're actually going to see some more burn come into the format with Volcanion EX coming into the game, and there are a number of decks are going to be teching that in to squeeze out a little extra damage here and there, but I don't think this attack is particularly strong. It's very expensive, you're not doing a lot of damage, and I don't think the burn is going to be enough to compensate. Wellspring Mask Ogerpon has the attack Bubble Drain for 2 water and a colorless. You do 100 damage and heal 30 damage from this Pokemon. This is not particularly strong either. And Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon has the attack Mountain Ramming for 2 fighting and a colorless, does 100 damage, and you discard the top card of your opponent's deck. This is I mean, I do like cards that mill. Only discarding one card and doing 100 damage, not particularly strong, especially in a format where this only has 110 HP. This is going to go down very easily. So at most, for 3 energy, when fighting cards have very little energy acceleration, if anything, to do 100 damage and discard one card doesn't feel like it's worth it at all. Admittedly, this is an underwhelming week for Pokemon card reveals. I think I'm okay with the Ogerpon cards not being particularly strong. Those are single prize Pokemon and they look like set filler, which is fine, and the arts are really pretty on those. I do think the Zeraora could have potential in a future Miraidon deck. I think the big bust this week is the Arven deck, and maybe someone will cook with those cards, and maybe just a couple of damage modifiers could be enough, but just at face value, it feels like you are not doing enough damage and the healing is not going to be enough to compensate for the lack of damage output from that deck. I hope that someday I'm proven wrong and players are able to find a way to compensate one way or another. Maybe it's adding potions or other healing cards in there. Maybe it's adding damage modifiers so that you are swinging for bigger damage and fixing the math on Arven or Arven's Mabosstiff's first attack. But whatever the case may be, these are the new cards for the week, and we will be seeing a lot more cards in the near future. But for now, I gotta get going. Thank you so much for watching. You can find me on all the things: YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at @InThirdPerson. You can find me on Twitch at @InThirdPerson, where I stream the Pokemon trading card game every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And check out the website inthirdperson.com for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits. And one last thing, thank you to everybody who's been supporting the channel over the last couple of weeks, where we've been doing a lot of post-rotation preview content. We've already covered a number of different decks like Charizard, Dragapult, Gardevoir. A lot of the big decks we have covered, a number of decks that aren't looking so hot in rotation I've covered as well, and we're going to continue that series throughout this week and right up until rotation. We will be looking at a number of post-rotation decks and talking and giving you an example and ideas of what those decks look like going forward, along with example deck lists. All right, time to get out of here. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.